London in the winter of 1816 was a city skilled in quiet cruelty, where ruin rarely announced itself with thunder, but with whispers that slid beneath drawing-room doors and curled around the hems of silk gowns. Avellini Harcourt learned this truth as she stood invisible among chandeliers and gilt mirrors, hearing her own name spoken with careful sympathy that soon sharpened into judgment. Her father's debts were common knowledge, her dwindling dowry a polite secret, and her beauty, once praised, now weighed against her usefulness. In such rooms, compassion lasted only until it became inconvenient. She had been offered mercy in the form society preferred: marriage to a man old enough to be her father, wealthy enough to erase her family's disgrace, and careless enough to believe obedience interchangeable with affection. To refuse him was to condemn her parents to penury and herself to social exile. Yet to accept would be a quieter death, one measured in years rather than moments. Avellini chose exile. She left London before dawn, wrapped in borrowed wool, dignity her sole remaining possession, carrying with her the certainty that she would rather vanish than be owned. The road north was unkind, and winter more so. Snow fell without apology, thickening the air until the world narrowed to breath and pain. Her carriage did not reach its destination. Whether through miscalculation or fate, it was abandoned miles from shelter, and Avellini continued on foot, boots soaked, limbs numbing, thoughts slowing into fragments. Pride carried her farther than strength ever could. By the time she crossed the boundary of the Ashbourne estate, the land itself seemed determined to erase her, white swallowing white, silence pressing like a verdict. The Duke of Ashbourne did not expect to find a woman dying in the snow. He rode with the mechanical precision of a man accustomed to order, his dark coat cutting a severe line against the storm, his expression as unmoved as the stone walls of the house he governed. At 26, he was already spoken of as distant, formidable, and unyielding, a nobleman whose wealth and title inspired respect but little affection. Loss had taught him early that attachment was a liability, and so he had learned to live without it. He saw her when his horse shied, sensing what its master had not. A dark shape lay half buried at the edge of the drive, hair spread like ink against the snow, gloveless hands blue with cold. When he dismounted, the storm seemed to hush, as though waiting. She was unmistakably a lady, even now. Her features, though slack with exhaustion, bore the careful symmetry of breeding, and the remnants of her attire spoke of better days. This was no peasant lost to weather, but a woman fallen between worlds. Protocol urged caution. Reputation demanded distance. A single misstep could invite scandal sharp enough to pierce even a duke's armor. Yet to leave her was to sentence her. He ordered her lifted and carried, his voice clipped, his face betraying nothing of the conflict tightening beneath his composure. When she stirred, a faint sound escaped her lips, not a plea, but a name spoken to no one. It struck him with unexpected force. Avellini woke to warmth and firelight, the ache of returning blood sharp as knives. She took in the high-ceilinged room, the heavy draperies, the unmistakable authority of the place, and finally the man standing apart from her bed. His presence filled the space without effort. When their eyes met, she understood at once that she owed him her life, and feared just as quickly what that debt might demand. He explained little, only that she was safe for the moment. Safe was a fragile word. As awareness settled, so too did dread. She was alone, unmarried, and under a roof governed by rules that did not bend for kindness. He understood this as well as she did. Standing there, with the storm still raging beyond the windows, the Duke of Ashbourne grasped the truth with chilling clarity. Saving her had created a problem no snowstorm could conceal, and whatever choice he made next would bind them both irrevocably. He had ruled estates and tenants, weighed contracts and consequences, but never before a moment so intimate in its peril. Avellini, gathering her strength, lifted her chin with a quiet bravery that unsettled him more than tears would have done. Neither spoke of names, nor of reasons, yet the air between them thickened with what remained unsaid. Outside, the wind battered the ancient walls, indifferent to rank or ruin. Within, two lives hovered on the brink of irrevocable change, and though neither yet knew the words that would seal their fate, both sensed that the storm had already decided they would not leave each other unchanged forever. The morning after the storm revealed the full severity of what had been done. Snow lay thick upon the grounds, sealing the estate from the outer world, while inside the house the servants moved with restrained curiosity, their eyes lowering too quickly whenever Avellini passed. She felt their awareness like a weight upon her shoulders, for though she was now warm and alive, her position remained perilous. Gratitude did not grant protection, and shelter did not erase impropriety. Each step she took through the silent corridors reminded her that survival alone was not safety. The Duke of Ashbourne understood this with merciless clarity. He was not a man given to indulgence, nor to self-deception, and the laws governing his world were etched into him as deeply as his title. A woman of gentle birth, discovered alone upon his land and brought beneath his roof, could not remain without consequence. Rumor required no proof, only opportunity, and once loosed it would devour them both. He weighed alternatives with cold efficiency and found none acceptable. To send her away was to risk her life anew. To keep her was to court disgrace. Duty, as ever, narrowed to a single, severe path. He summoned her to the small morning room overlooking the frozen gardens. Avellini entered with composed steps, her posture betraying neither fear nor expectation, though her heart beat with treacherous speed. She sensed that whatever words were to be spoken would alter her future beyond repair. The Duke did not offer pleasantries. He stood before the hearth, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed not upon her face, but somewhere beyond it, as though already distancing himself from the act to come. "You cannot remain here as you are," he said at last, his voice level, unadorned by apology. The statement was neither accusation nor kindness, merely fact. Avellini inclined her head, acknowledging what needed no explanation. She had lived long enough under society's judgment to recognize its verdict when it approached. Silence stretched, broken only by the soft crack of burning wood. "There is one remedy," he continued, turning then to face her fully. In his eyes, she saw no triumph, only resolve sharpened to necessity. "It is not one I would have chosen under other circumstances, but circumstances seldom consult preference." He paused, allowing her dignity the courtesy of forewarning, then delivered the words that would alter the course of both their lives. "You are my wife now." For a moment, the room seemed to recede. Avellini's breath caught, not in romantic astonishment, but in disbelief edged with stark comprehension. Marriage, in this context, was neither proposal nor promise. It was shelter rendered permanent, protection purchased at the cost of freedom. She searched his expression for mockery and found none. He was offering her his name as one might offer a shield, solid and impersonal. She considered refusal only briefly. Pride urged resistance, but reason prevailed. Outside these walls lay cold, hunger, and a society eager to punish her defiance. Within them lay safety, though stripped of illusion. "If this is the only means," she said quietly, "then I accept." Her voice did not tremble. She would not allow fear to be mistaken for regret. The ceremony was arranged with swift discretion. A parson arrived through the storm, stamping snow from his boots, unaware of the full strangeness of what he officiated. There were no witnesses beyond necessity, no music, no celebratory feast. Firelight cast long shadows as vows were spoken, each word binding, irrevocable. When the Duke placed the ring upon her finger, it slipped easily, too large for her hand, a subtle reminder of the disparity between them. When it was done, nothing visibly changed, yet everything had. The servants curtsied more deeply now, their curiosity sharpened by confusion. Avellini was shown to a bedchamber befitting her new rank, though she felt no sense of triumph crossing its threshold. That night, she learned another truth of her husband. He did not come to her. Distance, even within marriage, remained his chosen refuge. Alone, she removed the ring and turned it in her palm, its cold weight emblematic of the life she had entered. She was a duchess by law, yet a stranger still to the man who had claimed her. Somewhere in the house, the Duke of Ashbourne considered the consequences of his decision, aware that in protecting her from scandal, he had invited a far more dangerous uncertainty. Marriage had solved the immediate problem, but as the snow continued to fall, sealing them together in isolation, it became increasingly clear that legality alone could not govern the fragile, uncharted bond now forged between them. Neither yet understood how swiftly necessity would transform into scrutiny, and how scrutiny would soon demand something more perilous than duty. Days passed with the measured quiet of snowfall, each hour marked not by clocks but by the slow shift of light across the frozen windows. The world beyond the estate had ceased to exist, leaving the Duke and his new wife enclosed within a house that seemed to listen to every footstep. Their marriage, though absolute in law, unfolded in silence. They met at meals, exchanged courteous words, and parted again, two strangers navigating the same space with deliberate care. Yet beneath this calm lay an awareness that neither could ignore, an invisible thread tightening with each shared moment. Avellini learned the rhythms of the household quickly. She rose early, walked the galleries when the servants were occupied elsewhere, and read by the fire in the afternoons, choosing volumes that bore the weight of history rather than romance. She did not ask for attention, nor attempt to soften the distance between herself and her husband. If she grieved the life she had lost, she did so privately, preserving her dignity with a discipline that quietly impressed those who observed her. In endurance, she found purpose, and in purpose, a measure of peace. The Duke watched her more than he intended. He noted how she never complained of the cold, how she listened intently when spoken to, how she met discomfort with calm resolve. She did not behave as a woman rescued, nor as one who sought advantage. Instead, she carried herself as though she had chosen this fate, and that quiet authority unsettled him. He had expected gratitude, perhaps fear. What he encountered was composure sharpened by resilience. Their conversations, when they occurred, were restrained yet revealing. One evening, as the wind battered the windows and the fire burned low, she remarked upon the loneliness of the surrounding land, observing not its bleakness but its endurance. He replied that isolation had its uses, that distance simplified obligation. She met his words with a gentle contradiction, suggesting that distance merely postponed reckoning. The exchange lingered with him long after they retired, her insight striking closer to his guarded truths than he preferred. Gradually, small gestures emerged, unannounced and unacknowledged. He ensured the fires were lit earlier in the day. She left a book he had mentioned upon his writing desk. These acts were not confessions, yet they spoke in a language neither was prepared to name. The tension between them shifted, less brittle, more charged, as though the cold itself were loosening its grip. One night, snow falling thick once more, the Duke found her in the library long after supper, asleep in a chair, a shawl slipping from her shoulders. For a moment, he simply watched her, struck by the vulnerability she allowed only in solitude. He adjusted the shawl without waking her, his hand lingering a fraction longer than necessary. The contact, though brief, reverberated with unexpected force. He withdrew at once, unsettled by how keenly he felt the absence of that warmth. The following day, Avellini spoke of her family, not of debts or disgrace, but of laughter once shared, of summers long past. Her voice did not falter, yet he sensed the restraint it cost her. In response, he told her of his childhood, of a household governed by expectation rather than affection, of lessons learned too early and tenderness withheld. It was the first time he had spoken such truths aloud, and when he finished, silence settled between them, heavy yet intimate. "I do not require your kindness," she said softly. "I require only honesty." The words were neither challenge nor plea. They were an offering. He realized then that she had never sought his favor, only clarity. In that moment, something within him shifted, a recognition both unsettling and profound. As the storm raged outside, he understood that the danger he faced was no longer scandal, but attachment. The woman he had married to preserve order had begun, quietly and without intent, to dismantle it. And Avellini, watching him turn away, sensed that beneath his restraint lay a conflict as deep as her own. Their marriage had been born of necessity, but as winter held them fast, it became clear that survival had opened a door neither could now close without consequence. The snow began to recede almost imperceptibly, retreating from the edges of the drive as though ashamed of its long dominion. With it came the slow return of sound, distant hooves on the road, the faint suggestion of a world waiting beyond the gates. For the Duke of Ashbourne, this change brought unease rather than relief. Winter had granted him silence and control, and within that stillness, truths had surfaced he could no longer dismiss. The approach of spring threatened to expose them all. Avellini sensed the shift as keenly. Letters arrived at last. Formal inquiries wrapped in civility, reminders that society had not forgotten her sudden transformation. She answered them with careful restraint, neither inviting nor rejecting attention. Yet she understood what their arrival signified. Soon, expectation would demand its due, and the peculiar peace they had cultivated would fracture beneath scrutiny. She prepared herself to depart, if required, believing it the final dignity left to her. The Duke observed her quiet resolve with growing urgency. He had married her to protect her life, then kept his distance to preserve his composure. Yet distance had failed him. Her presence had altered the rhythm of his days, softened his silences, challenged the solitude he once mistook for strength. The thought of her absence unsettled him more deeply than scandal ever had. Still, he hesitated, bound by habit and fear of offering what he had never learned to give. The matter was forced when she requested an audience, her tone measured, her expression serene. She spoke of gratitude, of obligations fulfilled, of her intention not to burden him further once the roads cleared. Each word struck with precision, exposing the gulf between what had been agreed and what had quietly grown. He listened without interruption, his restraint taut as wire. When she finished, he rose and crossed the room, stopping a careful distance away. "You owe me nothing," he said, his voice low, unsteady for the first time. "I believed marriage would resolve a problem. I was wrong." She looked at him then, surprise flickering beneath her composure. He continued, compelled by a force he no longer resisted. "It created one I cannot solve with reason alone." He spoke of choice, of the distinction between duty performed and affection earned. He did not plead, nor command. Instead, he offered what had once seemed impossible. "I ask you to remain," he said, "not because you must, but because I wish it." The admission hung between them, fragile yet irrevocable. Avellini's response was not immediate. She weighed his words with care, measuring sincerity against caution. When she answered, her voice was steady, though emotion trembled beneath. "I will not stay where I am merely tolerated," she said, "nor where affection is owed." Her gaze held his, resolute and unafraid. "If I remain, it must be as a woman chosen." His reply was simple, stripped of all artifice. "Then choose to stay." In those words lay the surrender of his defenses. The silence that followed was not emptiness but anticipation, charged with the gravity of mutual understanding. At last, she inclined her head, a quiet assent that carried the weight of trust freely given. They did not mark the moment with ceremony. Instead, they stood together by the window as sunlight touched the thawing ground, watching the last remnants of snow dissolve into earth. The house, once austere, seemed to breathe anew. In the days that followed, their union transformed from legal fiction to lived reality, shaped by conversation, shared purpose, and a growing intimacy neither hurried nor restrained. When society finally arrived in earnest, it found a duchess secure in her place, and a duke changed beyond recognition. Their marriage, once whispered about with suspicion, settled into acceptance, its origins rendered irrelevant by its evident strength. Yet for them, the true vow had been spoken long before witnesses returned, in a quiet room at winter's end. Still, the Duke knew that love, like land, required tending. As they walked the grounds together, he understood that the future would test them in ways snowstorms never could. But he faced it without regret. The woman who had entered his life, half frozen and desperate now, walked beside him by choice. And in that choice lay a promise neither time nor judgment could erode.